Welcome to your weekly UAS news update. This is the week of May 17, 2021. And the first thing this week is we are celebrating 2 years of news update. I know we had the 100th episode not too long ago, but this is 2 full years nonstop of providing news to you guys. We started with not much, and now we cover a ton of topics every week. We get a ton of views for all of you, so I'm really excited about being able to provide this, and here's to another couple of years. Starting this week, we've got the Mavic 3. There's been some more rumors, some more information coming out. So we're going to talk to Haya in a second from Drone Excel, and he's going to tell us what's the latest and greatest about the drone. The FAA has released a website that shows the mean of compliance and declaration of compliance. If you don't know what that means, let's take a look because this is kind of an important step into flying over people and remote ID, so we'll get to that. We have Sony that released something or has a patent for noise canceling drones. And I know that all these words put together in one sentence don't really make sense, so we'll take a look at what that looks like. We have a bridge inspection that failed pretty badly, and now an entire interstate is blocked for that section, and we'll talk about what happened and how they're going to fix it. And then the last thing is Jason and I are going to be on the road next week, so we'll talk about our travel plans and hopefully meet some of you guys while we're on the road. So let's get to it. And the first story this week is the Mavic 3, and there's been quite a bit of information on the Mavic 3, so I wanted to bring on Haya Castello from Drone Excel, and you're familiar with Haya, you've seen him on the show before, and you see him also when we do the Pixel podcast if you listen to us. But Haya found a whole bunch of information about the Mavic 3, and it looks like we may have a drone eventually this year, which is pretty awesome. So Haya, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, Greg. Pleasure being here as well, again. The Mavic 3 is, of course, the most anticipated drone from DJI. I think a lot of people have their hopes up and are very curious to see what this drone is going to be about. It better be good, because the latest drone from DJI, the DJI Air 2S, is also a very capable drone with a 1-inch sensor already. So for the Mavic 3 to come in, it needs to outperform that one. It will be benchmarked, of course, against the Mavic 2 Pro as well as the Phantom 4 Pro version 2. So the bar is already set kind of high, and we've been hoping and waiting for this new drone, the Mavic 3, to appear, and now finally it seems that we might be actually getting it in either late August or early September based on the latest rumors. But before we go there, I kind of want to take you back to the first article we had, which was, March 20th, I think, when we had that first sketch of the Mavic 3. And maybe we can share that in the video as well. This is a sketch from somebody within DJI in China who was so friendly to share it with us. And as you can see, we've kind of marked the different features that we expect on the drone. First of all, in the front, we had we think there were going to be upward-facing obstacle avoidance sensors. However, now looking at the latest photos, we're not quite sure if they're going to be located there. But as you can see, there's like this opening, which if it's not to do with obstacle avoidance, then it will very likely be some kind of air intake, if you will. And if you move further back in this image, you see there's 2 scoops on the side as well for air intake. A new design feature for the flagship Mavic drone will be that the battery will be loaded from the back. Somewhat comparable to what we know from the Phantom 4, but even also from the Mini 2 and the original Mini. So that's going to be different from the Mavic 2 Pro, where the battery clicks in from the top. Side sensors for obstacle avoidance we think are going to be at the back of the drone. And if you look lower in the image, you see there's another air scoop in front of the rear legs. And then the camera, we know that this is not going to be the ultimate design of the camera, but we of course do expect the camera to be quite an upgrade from existing drones. And we can perhaps talk about that a little more if you want later.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, there was something else. There was another drawing, I think, that came up a little bit later of just it looks like the top part of the drone and the battery design, showing a little bit more about the battery design. So can you talk about that one drawing?
Yeah, that takes us to the end of March. As you can see, it's basically from a patent drawing, and it shows you kind of how the battery slides and clicks in from the back. It seems to have a similar connection. If you look at the image, there's a little lip that seems very familiar to the connection that we've seen at the Mini and the Mini 2. You see the same double air scoops. It's not a very detailed picture. I think it's more just like an instructional graphic, if you will, like as to how this would work. We've seen that before in patent drawings where the drawings aren't always as accurate to the actual production model. Typically, it's just to explain a concept or an idea that's been patented, and I think that might be the case here as well. But we're pretty confident that the battery will be sliding in from the back of the drone and then kind of clicking in place.
And the camera in itself, let's talk about this, because you and I have talked about this before in some of the shows that we've been on together, and we talked about the fact that DJI just came up with this 1-inch sensor on the Air 2S and kind of bringing the game upward. And what's next? What is the next level of drones that we're going to have? What kind of sensors? So did you have more information on this recently?
We don't have any specific or rumored information on what kind of camera specs and features we can expect. However, if you kind of go back in time, we've seen those images of that prototype of the Phantom with interchangeable lenses. The official story from DJI was always that this was a one-off model specifically for a certain customer. We don't know if that's true or not. It might also have been an internal project to see if interchangeable lenses, if that will be feasible on a drone of the size of a Phantom. However, that idea never went away, really. Like, people have always been talking about it. Of course, we know interchangeable lenses from the Inspire series as well. And as you get more professional with photography and videography, to have prime lenses and to be able to interchange them is an important request from people. So the expectation has always been there, basically since seeing that original prototype, that maybe the Mavic 3 would have interchangeable lenses as well. Now, we still don't know if that's going to be the case. I could imagine that an alternative would be a very fast zoom lens, maybe with a limited zoom range, but a very fast zoom lens that might get you the ease of use and a small portable drone, but still get you that more professional video quality, if you will. But again, so going back to the fact that we don't have any official information on this, if you look on the other hand though at where the previous DJI drones are in terms of quality when it comes to video and photography, take for instance the Phantom 4 Pro version 2, that had very crisp 4K video capabilities, and I think a lot of people were disappointed with the launch of the Mavic 2 Pro because that video quality wasn't quite as crisp and as nice as from the original Phantom. And now with the launch of the DJI Air 2S with, I think it's 150 megabytes per second, I mean, that video quality is quite high, and I think rivals, if not betters, the video quality from the Mavic 2 Pro. So within its own product category, DJI has already raised the bar significantly. So the Mavic 3 has to be better than the Mavic 2 Pro, obviously, has to be better than the Phantom 4 Pro version 2, but it also has to beat the Air 2S, I would imagine. The Air 2S comes in at slightly over $1,000. So it leaves space open within the lineup for a Mavic 3, let's say close to $2,000, but with significantly better video and photo capabilities. And that's kind of what I'm expecting DJI to do.
Yeah. I don't see how they can sell this drone without having a major upgrade to the camera compared to the Air 2S right now. And the zoom would be awesome, quite frankly. I've been playing a lot with the Air 2S recently, and it's kind of becoming my go-to drone if I'm not flying the Inspire 2, just because it is just awesome. It flies well, and the camera, the quality is just pretty cool. So that's interesting. Now, the one thing that I found interesting is that the early drawings that you get did not really have any information on the propellers. And as we look into I was looking at some of the further articles that you had, and one of them had a patent with the propellers at the bottom of the motor in the front. And do we know that this is, because it looks like the drawing in itself was not the Mavic 3. It looked more like actually an Air 2 or kind of design. So where did that information come from, and how does that translate into what we think we're going to get in the 3?
Yeah, these are also coming from patent drawings. The problem with patents is that DJI, and I think it's now probably in the thousands, they register and patent a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts and things that they might use or may not ever end up using. So a lot of those drawings, they show concepts and ideas, and they're meant to protect those concepts and ideas. We've seen the same thing, if you remember, with the propellers that you kind of push and turn and then they stick. That became an issue at some point. To mount propellers upside down, I mean, we know this already from other drones as well. I mean, of course, you can make it work and there might be some benefits to it. I think this patent is more DJI just protecting an idea and claiming a certain concept. I'm not entirely sure if we're going to see this for the Mavic 3. I'm not sure if there's a real benefit. I mean, of course, with the original Mavic Pro and even with the Phantom, if you fly at a certain speed and you move the camera in a certain direction, sometimes you would actually see the propellers in view. And I think DJI is going to try to make sure that will never happen, of course, because it messes up your video footage. I'm not sure if upside down mounted propellers would help you to resolve that issue, or whether it's better to mount them the normal way. We haven't really seen DJI do this with any of the other Mavic drones, so I'm not quite sure if this is something we should expect for the Mavic 3. On top of that, I wouldn't have a personal preference either way. I mean, if the thing flies like we expect Mavics to fly, and if you have video footage in any direction without seeing the props in view, that would be all I care about, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't really matter what design they decide to use. So now we've seen a lot of drawings, but in the March area, and then now as we're getting closer into the summer, we're getting actually some actual footage. It looks like. So there was one image that you shared, which looks like was maybe from a production line. Can you tell us more about that one?
Yeah, that it might either be a pre-production or actually from the production. We've been told that this was actually the body work from a production model. It does seem that way. I mean, if you look at it from the side, you can see where the arms would be mounted, and you can see that is the typical DJI Mavic design, where one kind of swings in and the other rotates underneath. So it definitely has the hallmark features of a DJI design. It's hard to say, right? I mean, if you go back to the DJI Air 2S, we've seen images of that drone with the 4 obstacle avoidance sensors, I think already 2 years ago when we saw the original one. And only recently that drone was actually brought to market. So it's not always easy to know exactly when certain photos were taken and whether we're looking at a pre-production or a prototype or an actual production model. We've been told that this is actually from the production line, and if it turns out that this drone will be launched in August or early September, as we've been told, then yeah, that would make sense. Other than that, it's hard to get a lot of information out of this one image. I mean, you see the double air intakes on the lower right hand corner in the image. There's a hole in the center, which most likely will be for a screw. There's another air intake on the side. You're not going to get a ton of information from this one picture. More recently, however, the latest article, we saw a photo that is a photo of the top shell, body shell of the DJI, what we think Mavic 3. And here you see the same air intake at the front. We don't see the typical round obstacle avoidance sensors on the top, but at the same time, this part of the drone does not cover the entire top of the drone. So it might well be that the upward facing obstacle avoidance sensors are mounted more towards the rear, and that part is not shown here. So that would explain why we're not seeing them. One thing that is curious though in this photo where you see that body shell on somebody's hand is that the body shell seems to be relatively small for a drone with the features that we expect from a Mavic 3. So there's been this discussion online, okay, are we actually looking at a body shell from a DJI Mavic 3 drone, assuming that it's going to have obstacle avoidance sensors in all directions, it's going to have a bigger camera, it needs more processing power, we still want more than 30 minutes flight time. So having all these components in there and a battery that can power the entire unmanned aircraft, you would think that things would grow in size. And I think that's where the suspicion comes from, that this seems to be perhaps too small to house all that hardware. However, you could argue the other direction, saying, well, if we've seen anything with DJI, is that they're able to shrink drones and make the bodywork more compact, more aerodynamic, and make drones smaller, lighter, and more capable. And of course, when it comes to aerodynamics and flying objects, then the less weight and the less mass you have to fly, that benefits in all kinds of ways. especially with flight time and battery size. So I'm not convinced that this is not the body shell of a Mavic 3. I think it is. I think what it may point to is that maybe the Mavic 3 is actually going to be a drone that's not that much bigger from the original Mavic 2 Pro, but at the same time brings us much improved video recording and photography features. So it's going to be really interesting. The top shell picture is the one image that we showed in that article. There's another image that shows more of the body frame with all the different holes and openings. I'm not able to get too much information out of that image. It seems to match up with the rest of what we've seen of the Mavic 3. The fact that these images are now being leaked, and also the fact that we know that DJI resellers and dealers have already received their last call to place orders for the Mavic 2 Pro and Zoom, is a strong indication that this drone, I think, is heading to the market relatively shortly. And as I mentioned earlier, what we've heard is late August, early September that we can expect the DJI Mavic 3.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So on that picture, it could also be somebody's hand is really, really big.
Could be. That's a good point.
No, well, I mean, you and I, you know, the DJI is not afraid of releasing more than one drone in the same year. So who knows if we had a Mavic 3, a Mini 3 on the way as well, and getting images from that as well. So that's not out of the question either.
I was going to say one thing that always kind of surprised me from DJI, and I think this is where they're different from the more traditional companies, is that one, they're not afraid to compete, but they're also not afraid to cannibalize on their own product line and compete with their own products. I mean, if you see if you look at the original Mavic Mini, and then a year later they introduced the Mini 2, which basically makes the original Mini obsolete. They do the same with the Mavic Air 2 and then the Air 2S. DJI is not afraid to push new products to the market. I know of stories where they might have waited to see what the competition was doing before introducing their product. I mean, we've seen that with the GoPro Karma and then the original Mavic Pro coming out. But yeah, DJI is very competitive, and they compete also within their own product lineup. I would not be surprised at all if the new Mavic 3 ends up being an affordable but very, very capable drone, and also much smaller and more compact than what we've been expecting.
Yep, yeah, extremely exciting. So end of summer, hopefully we get something else and another drone to buy, another drone to play with. So, well, Haya, appreciate your time as always, and I thank you for bringing all this information. We'll definitely bring you back on when we have more photos and more information. And in the meantime, if you want to hear more from Haya, you can go on dronexcel.co. I'll put a bunch of links in the description so you can see all the articles. We'll put the photos so you can see them. And again, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg. And I'm sure I'll see you soon again on another show.
All right, sounds good. The second topic this week is a pretty big one. If you remember when the FAA released a new regulation in April of this year, there's this requirement for means of compliance and declaration of compliance. And this applies to remote ID, and this applies to operation over people. We've made videos about this, and you can see the link up here where we talk about flying over people and all the things that need to happen. And if you remember from that video, if you've watched it, or if you're familiar with the concept, the FAA wants you to have a category 1, 2, 3, or 4 before you can fly over people. Well, for these drones to be approved as category drones, the manufacturer needs to submit what's called a means of compliance, and the FAA is going to then issue a declaration of compliance. The means of compliance is just a fancy word for saying, how are you going to comply with the regulation? And then the declaration of compliance is basically the FAA saying, well, yeah, we declare that this drone from this manufacturer meets these requirements. So up until now, there was really no place for us to find that information. The website is now available. I'll put a link down in the description, and it's empty right now. There's actually a document, but it's just a summary of the regulation. But as we see drone manufacturers get approved for flying over people for category drones and for remote ID, the concept is the same for remote ID, then we're going to start to see these means of compliance and declaration of compliance show up on that FAA website. So let's just assume, fast forward, and DJI comes up with a Mavic 3, and the Mavic 3 gets approved to fly over people as a category 2 drone, then it would show up on this website where you can verify that your drone with that specific serial number meets the requirement and now can be flown over people as a category 2 drone. So, like I said, this is kind of a big deal because, well, this was kind of the next step that we're waiting in order to get these drones approved as category drones. Does that mean that we have a category drone around the corner? Probably not. Based on conversations we've had on the Pixel Drone Show with Brendan Schulman from DJI, it looks like it's going to be a little while because we don't have the standards yet in place so that manufacturers can do the means of compliance. So it's paperwork, and eventually we'll probably eventually we will get there. Not probably, we will get there. Something cool coming from Sony, and I had to kind of wrap my head around this one, but they have a patent for a set of drones that can be used for noise cancelling purposes. Now, this is not to cancel the noise of drones. This is to cancel the noise coming from the outside into, let's say you have a group of people sitting in the middle, and this is kind of what the patent picture looks like. You have a group of people sitting in the middle, and they're surrounded by drones that help to cancel the noise. Now, I have a hard time wrapping my head. I understand how noise canceling works. Is actually you repeat the same noise and then eventually they cancel each other out. That's how noise canceling headphones work. But with drones, I'm not really sure how you would achieve that with different speeds, maybe with different types of sound. So an interesting concept to say the least. Not sure if we're ever going to see this technology in real life, but I can't imagine myself being surrounded by a bunch of drones and actually being in silence because the drones cancel the noise. So it'll be interesting to see what they do out of this. The next story comes out of Arkansas and Tennessee, and this is a bridge over the Mississippi River. And the bridge over the Mississippi on I-40 is now closed because there's a giant crack in one of the beams. And they say, what does this have to do with drones? Well, the interesting thing is that this bridge was actually inspected back in 2019 via drones, and they missed the crack. And it's interesting because, as you can see in the picture that's playing in the background right now, this was the crack when the video was shot in 2019. Now, since the inspector actually has been fired by the Arkansas Department of Transportation, and now the Tennessee Department of Transportation is going to go on I-55 to perform inspections on other bridges to make sure that everything is good. Now you can see the crack now, the way that it is now using these pictures here, and this is more than a crack. Obviously, it's a complete separation of the two pieces of the beam. Now, what used to be one beam is now two beams, and they're obviously going to work on this and fix it. But interesting to see that the drone actually had seen, the footage had recorded that the crack was there, but the inspector actually missed it. So just an interesting use of drone. Sadly, not effective at this stage, but hopefully this is something that they can pick up in the future. The last thing this week is Jason and I are hitting the road on Monday. We're going to be in Texas on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, north of Austin. We're going to this thing called the Texas Public Safety Response Robot Summit. And we'll be out there and we'll be talking to a bunch of different companies. Autel is going to be there, Skydio, DJI, Parrot, DroneSense, you name it, is going to be out there presenting things. And then we'll be out there as well presenting Pilot Institute. So this is a public safety focused event. We are going to be on Monday night in North Austin, and we're going to meet with a bunch of our students. So if you're a student, if you're in the Austin area or in Texas and you want to come and join us, feel free to do so. Join into our Facebook group, and you'll see the event. You'll see all the information where we're going to meet, and I hope to see you there so we can chat in person finally and do what we do best, which is talk about drones and fly drones. So I hope to see you there. And this is it for this week. As always, we have the airplane news update that's going on. This week, we're talking about a $1,000 landing fee that we talked about last week, and we have an update that's in Massachusetts. We talk about a mid-air collision, and you probably have seen this in the news, between a Key Lime Air aircraft and a Cirrus. and they collided up in the air, and actually everybody survived, which is just absolutely amazing. Very, very lucky for both pilots. We'll talk about Airbus and Air France that are facing manslaughter charges after an accident in 2009. We'll talk about an aircraft that lost an emergency exit door on takeoff, not something that you want to see on your flight. And then we'll talk a brand new aircraft from SE Aeronautics. So that's it. That's all I have. Like, subscribe, do all you do, leave a comment, rude remarks. You guys made fun of my rude remark comment last week. I had a boss that always said that at the end of a meeting. He said, anybody has comments, concern, rude remarks. So I love talking with you guys. So leave the comments down in here if you have questions about any of this. And that's it. I hope to see some of you in Austin. And in the meantime, fly safe.